Welcome to the Latin American Studies Clips. Today, we will be discussing the Zoot riots, a significant event in American history that occurred in 1943 during World War II. Although these riots are often remembered for the distinctive clothing worn by the young people involved, they were actually the result of deeper social issues including racism, discrimination, cultural conflict, and wartime tensions. To understand the riots, we must first examine the historical context. During the 1930s and early 1940s, many Mexican-American families lived in Southern California, particularly in Los Angeles. Young Mexican-Americans developed a unique style of dress known as the Zoot suit, which featured oversized jackets, high-waisted trousers, and long chains. For many young people, the Zoot suit represented cultural pride, self-expression, and identity. However, others viewed it negatively, especially during World War II, when fabric rationing was in effect and the suits were seen as wasteful and unpatriotic. At the same time, Mexican Americans faced widespread discrimination in housing, education, employment, and interactions with law enforcement. Negative stereotypes were reinforced by newspapers and other media outlets, which frequently portrayed Mexican American youth as criminals and gang members. These portrayals increased fear and prejudice among the wider public. One of the most important events leading up to the Zoot suit riots was the Sleepy Lagoon incident of 1942. The incident began when the body of a young Mexican-American man was discovered near a reservoir known as Sleepy Lagoon on the outskirts of Los Angeles. Although investigators had little evidence connecting specific individuals to the crime, police launched a massive crackdown on Mexican-American youth. More than 600 young people were questioned or arrested, and many were treated as suspects simply because of their ethnicity or their association with local youth groups. Eventually, 22 Mexican-American youths were charged in what became known as the Sleepy Lagoon murder trial. Throughout the trial, the defendants faced unfair treatment. They were not allowed to sit near their attorneys, were often prevented from changing clothes or grooming themselves, and were presented to the jury in ways that made them appear dangerous and criminal. Prosecutors argued that Mexican-American culture itself made the defendants more likely to commit violent crimes, reflecting the racist beliefs that were common at the time. Despite weak evidence and conflicting testimony, several defendants were convicted and sentenced to prison. The case attracted national attention and reinforced negative stereotypes about Mexican-American communities. Newspapers used sensational headlines that portrayed Mexican-American youth as violent gang members, leading many people to believe that they were a threat to public safety. Although the convictions were later overturned by an appeals court in 1944. Due to the unfair nature of the trial, the damage had already been done. The case increased hostility toward Mexican Americans and created an atmosphere of fear and suspicion in Los Angeles. This climate of prejudice helped set the stage for the Zoot suit riots. In June 1943, groups of U.S. servicemen began attacking young people wearing Zoot suits in Los Angeles. Victims were beaten, stripped of their clothing, and humiliated in public. In many cases, police officers arrested the victims rather than the attackers. The riots continued for several days and eventually spread to other cities in the American Southwest. Military authorities ultimately intervened by restricting servicemen from entering certain areas, which helped bring the violence to an end. The effects of the Zoot suit riots were both immediate and long-lasting. In the short term, they exposed the unequal treatment faced by Mexican Americans and highlighted serious problems within law enforcement and the justice system. The riots also attracted national attention because they occurred while the United States was fighting a war against oppression abroad, creating a contradiction between American democratic ideals and the reality of racial discrimination at home. In the years that followed, the riots became an important symbol of the struggle for civil rights. They encouraged greater political activism within Mexican-American communities and contributed to the development of a stronger sense of cultural identity. Historians often view the riots as an early chapter in the broader fight for equality that would later influence the Chicano movement and other civil rights efforts during the 1960s and 1970s. In conclusion, the Zoot suit riots were about far more than fashion. They revealed the racial and social tensions that existed in American society during World War II and demonstrated how prejudice, media bias, and inequality could lead to violence. The Sleepy Lagoon case showed how the legal system and the media could reinforce racial stereotypes, while the riots themselves exposed the consequences of those stereotypes in everyday life. Their legacy continues to be studied today because they offer important lessons about civil rights, cultural identity, and the ongoing pursuit of justice and equality in the United States.